Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're taking on a book that, well, it's not just influential, it's one of those books that has genuinely changed how millions of people think about suffering, about purpose.
We're talking about Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning.
Exactly. And it's such a unique text, isn't it?
It really is. It sits at this strange intersection of, philosophy, psychology, and just raw testimony. Frankl was a psychiatrist, but also a Holocaust survivor.
And he managed to distill this just horrifying experience into an argument about being human that's surprisingly hopeful.
That's the core of it.
And that's really our mission for this deep dive. Frankl's central idea is pretty counterintuitive. He argues that our deepest drive isn't for pleasure or for power, but for meaning, the will to meaning.
So today we want to cut through the heaviness of the subject matter and really pull out the essential ideas of his philosophy, logotherapy.
And show you why it is still so incredibly relevant today.
And the book is structured perfectly for that. The first half is his experience in the camps. It's visceral. And the second half is the clinical theory that grew right out of it.
So let's start there. In The Crucible, Frankl's time in Auschwitz and Dachau, it's not really a straightforward memoir. It's more of a psychological analysis of survival, right?
Absolutely. He was a scientist observing himself, observing his fellow prisoners under conditions that were, they were designed to strip away every single shred of your identity.
And in that observation, he saw a pattern.
He did. He saw that the prisoners went through 3 predictable psychological phases. And understanding these is really critical to understanding how we cope with extreme duress.
Okay, so let's break them down. What's the first thing he saw when people arrived?
The first phase was just intense shock. It started on the train ride in, and it just peaked during that initial processing.
The shaving of the hair, the stripping of clothes.
All of it. The brutal selection process. It was this period of just overwhelming disbelief and terror all mixed together. A total severance from your old reality.
But you can't live in that state of shock forever.
You can't. And that's what leads to the second, much longer phase. Apathy. This was a defense mechanism. It was absolutely necessary for survival.
So it wasn't weakness or giving up?
No, not at all. It was an emotional numbing. You had to do it. You had to conserve every ounce of mental energy just to get through the next hour, the next minute.
So you become indifferent.
Indifferent to the beatings, the disease, the constant death. Because if you let yourself feel all of it, the grief, the pity, the outrage, you'd have psychological breakdown. And that often meant physical death.
Right. But here's the fascinating part, the part that really birthed his whole philosophy. Even with all that suffering, that required apathy. Not everyone gave up.
No.
What was the difference? What separated the people who endured from those who, well, didn't?
The difference was meaning, personal meaning. Frankl realized survival wasn't just about physical strength or luck. The people who were far more likely to make it were the ones who had a future orientation.
They had a reason to live.
A specific reason.
Yeah.
For Frankl himself, it was the urgent need to rewrite the scientific manuscript he'd lost. And even more than that, it was the image of his wife he held in his mind.
So concrete things they could hold on to.
Incredibly personal things. For some, it was their children. For others, a deep religious faith. He saw men who would find meaning in watching a sunset or sharing their last piece of bread. These moments where spiritual life just transcended the physical starvation.
So the suffering itself wasn't the final word.
No. The individual's response to the suffering was the key. Their purpose. It all comes down to that quote he took from Nietzsche. He who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow.
If you have that one powerful reason, the external circumstances can't completely crush you.
Exactly. And that real-world proof point became the foundation for everything that followed.
That brings us to the third phase he observed, which I think a lot of people might not expect.
Disillusionment.
Yes, after liberation.
Why would freedom lead to a crisis?
Well, it's a tragic insight, really. So many survivors had kept themselves going with this one single goal. Survive, get home, reunite with family.
And then they did. Or they found out their families were gone.
And suddenly their central why was gone. For years, their purpose was just survive today. Now they were free, but the world had moved on. They felt this bitterness, this sense of meaninglessness.
An existential vacuum.
Precisely.
Okay.
And Frankl knew that's what his therapy, logotherapy, had to address, not just for trauma survivors, but for everyone.
Okay, perfect transition. So if the camps proved the power of purpose, how did he turn that into a system? Let's talk logotherapy.
Right. So logotherapy is his model of existential analysis. And to really get it, you have to put it in context. At the time, you had Freud, who said we're driven by the pleasure principle.
Right, our past, our primal urges.
Then you had Adler, who focused on the will to power, the need to feel competent, superior. But Frankl just shifts the focus completely.
He does. He says both pleasure and power are secondary. The fundamental human drive is the will to meaning, logos. If that drive gets frustrated, that's when we get what he called neurogenic neuroses.
So neuroses that come from an existential problem, not just a psychological one.
Exactly, a crisis of meaning.
So let's get into the core principles. There are 3 key ideas you really need to grasp.
Absolutely. The first one is foundational, and it's a tough one for some people to swallow. It's that life has meaning under all circumstances, even suffering.
Okay, I have to push back a bit on that, because how is that not just, a sophisticated kind of denial? Just telling yourself a story to feel better.
It's a critical question. He's
Well-
not saying suffering is good. He's saying it's unavoidable. The difference is the choice involved. Denial ignores the pain.
Okay.
Logotherapy asks you to acknowledge the pain, but then to immediately recognize you are still free to choose your attitude toward it. The meaning isn't in the suffering, it's in the heroic decision you make despite it.
So the act of enduring with dignity becomes the meaningful act itself. Okay. What's the second principle?
The second just reinforces that. Our main motivation is the search for meaning, which is why you can't pursue happiness directly.
It's a side effect.
It's a side effect. It ensues when you're dedicated to a cause greater than yourself or a person other than yourself. If you wake up and say, I must be happy today, you're almost guaranteed to fail.
Right. It's a formula for frustration. And the third principle, this is the practical part. How do we actually find this meaning?
He gives us 3 main avenues. The first is pretty straightforward. Creative works. Doing a job well, creating something, making a contribution.
Purpose through what you do. Makes sense. What's the second?
The second is through experience. Finding meaning by encountering something or someone, appreciating art, nature, but most of all, love. He wrote about how the image of his wife gave his suffering in the camp meaning, even when he didn't know if she was alive.
And the third way, this is the one that ties it all back to the camps. It's the hardest one.
It is. It's finding meaning through our attitude toward unavoidable suffering. This is for the things you cannot change. A chronic illness, the loss of a loved one. The meaning comes from the courage and dignity you show in the face of it.
Which brings us to one of his most powerful quotes about choice. It's almost terrifying that even when you have nothing left, you still have that internal freedom.
It puts all the responsibility back on you, doesn't it?
Oh.
The quote is, when we are no longer able to change a situation, we are challenged to change ourselves.
We can't always control the how of our life, but the why is always our choice.
That is the ultimate human freedom.
So let's talk about the impact today. I mean, this book was published in 1946. It sold over 12 million copies. It seems more relevant than ever because Frankl basically diagnosed modern problems before they were widespread.
He really did. And the most important concept for today is what he called the existential vacuum.
That term just hits so hard, doesn't it? We're all so connected, so busy, but often feel empty.
That's the exact symptom. The existential vacuum is that widespread feeling that life is meaningless. He argued modern society actually encourages it. We have affluence, but we've lost the traditional instincts and values that used to guide us.
And we try to fill that hole.
We do. We fill it with consumerism, addiction, aggression, workaholism. We chase pleasure, thinking it will bring us purpose. Frankl says we have it backwards.
It makes so much sense in a world of burnout and the endless social media scroll. We're so productive, but are we purposeful?
That's the central question. And his antidote to that is another key idea, tragic optimism.
We should define that carefully, because it's not just looking on the bright side.
No, it's much tougher than that. Tragic optimism is the ability to stay hopeful and say yes to life, despite what he called the tragic triad, pain, guilt, and death.
So you don't ignore those things.
You face them head on. You acknowledge that you're going to face pain, you're going to make mistakes, and you're going to die. But you still believe that life can be meaningful. You can use suffering to grow, or use your freedom to fulfill a purpose.
So if you get laid off or get a bad diagnosis, it's not about pretending it's okay. It's about saying, my response to this is my last freedom.
Exactly. It's a very mature kind of hope. It's the belief that life is potentially meaningful right up to the very last moment.
And that all comes back to his final big idea for today. Responsibility and choice. Even when we feel trapped by our job, our mortgage, whatever, Frankl says that inner freedom is always there.
That choice of attitude is what defines us. He argues we are not just products of our biology or our society. We are self-determining. We are ultimately responsible for finding and fulfilling our own unique meaning.
It's just such a deep, powerful resource. The core insight is so clear. Our response to suffering defines us, and finding our why provides the ultimate human purpose. It's a message that goes so far beyond trauma and speaks directly to the anxiety of modern life.
It challenges you to ask every day, what is life asking of me right now?
So here's the thought we want to leave you with based on all this. If Frankl is right, if our primary drive really is for meaning, not for pleasure, what daily choices are you making that move you toward purpose instead of just temporary satisfaction?
Yeah.
When you're facing something difficult right now, what would Frankl advise you to look for? Is there a creative contribution you can make? Is there a moment of love or connection? Or is it simply the dignity with which you choose to meet the burden?
The meaning is always there. It's just waiting to be found.
We'll see you on the next Deep Dive.